Okay, let's not stand on ceremony here. Shout out to Mr. Luca first and foremost for the super chat early. Mr. Luca says, the Partridge fanboys won't stop. We'll come on to the Partridge fanboys. Big up everyone else locked in the live chat. Johnny Rico says, Happy New Year. Yeah, Fury said that in May. Real bad man. In fact, let's get that up. What do you mean? Real bad man. That's right. Ortega. Dominic A. Fabian. We got Ben. Sludsworth. Soul Rebel. Mike. Gavin, Sean, Ayed, Exactamundo. Yon. Felix. Jack Trussler. Big up. Mark Hatch. So, I'll give you a rundown of what we'll be talking about in this stream, first of all. We'll be talking about the Eubank Benn rematch that's just been announced via Turkey Al Sheikh and the situation regarding Eubank's promotional contract with Ben Shalom. We'll talk about Jake Paul calling out Anthony Joshua again. We'll talk about Dave Allen and his next move, and also a video that he posted, I think earlier on today, of him shadowboxing in his backyard. And, well, you'll see the screenshots later on in the stream to understand why I'm having this as a topic of discussion. We'll talk, of course, about Partridge and his latest nonsense. Once again, trying to say that he was jobbed in both Usyk fights. He also said he'll only come back for Usyk. But whether he actually sticks to that or not, we'll see. He claims that he's got no regrets over not fighting AJ. And that AJ versus Jake Paul is a 50-50 fight. Is what Tyson Fury's saying. All right. Then we've got Jarrell Miller. He claims in a couple of different interviews which he's done today that AJ has turned down a fight with him 4 times in the last month. This is what he's saying. He also claims that Deontay Wilder and Jared Anderson have turned down fights with him as well in the past few weeks. We'll be talking about the Matchroom rebrand. Have you guys seen this? Matchroom rebranding. I'll give you my thoughts on that. And the official launch, I think they're having some type of press conference or whatever tomorrow. So maybe I'll talk a bit more about it tomorrow. I might do a dedicated stream to it when we get, or a dedicated stream about it when we get more details. If it's a slow news day, that is. If there's something more interesting to talk about, then yeah, that will take a back seat. But we can get into that a little bit here. And finally, I want to talk about some of AJ's flaws as a promoter of himself over the years, including now. We'll get into that later on, all right? So we got the chat room filling up here. Big up D with a super chat. He says, loving the lives, looking forward to you covering Chisora and Big Baby Miller. Yeah, I saw the interviews because they did several interviews together earlier on today, and they were pretty funny, to be fair. There's a lot of banter between Chisora and Miller. Chisora sticks it on Miller in a very frank and honest kind of way, pulling no punches. But at the same time, they obviously have a lot of respect for each other because, again, there was no like bad blood. There was a bit of trash talk between them, but it was all in good fun. So yeah, shout out to D. Derek Chisora did he actually mention the failed test? But he said that the issues that Miller has had in his career have obviously been of his own making. And he's trying to play victim right now, and it's a bit ridiculous. Because here we have a guy who signed to fight Fabio Wardley, then pulled out. And he's acting like, oh, nobody will fight me, nobody will fight me. Fabio Wardley just wanted to fight you. And Derek Chisora stuck it on Miller about the Daniel Dubois thing, the way that Miller's always trashing UK fighters, acting like they're soft. But when he fought a UK fighter, the first time he got stopped. And then the next time, he was signed to fight a UK fighter and he pulled out. And of course, the first time he signed to fight a UK fighter ever, as far as I'm aware, was AJ. And he felt like he had to take a bunch of PEDs to beat him. So here's a guy who's always trashing UK fighters, but he's either juicing against them, gets stopped by him, or pulls out before the fight's even happened. That's Big Baby Miller for you, right? Shout out to Matt in the chat. He says, just saying, if they want to sell a fight to me, there's got to be a little bad blood. None of these dinners publicly shown like Crawford, Canelo, etc. And I'm sure the vast majority of boxing fans would agree with you, Matt. Beef sells. People want to see a bit of bad blood, even if it's fake. In fact, sometimes fake bad blood can actually be more funny. When both guys are really into it and they're willing to do silly things, WWE style stuff, it can actually be more funny than real beef. Although, when the real stuff is good, it's the best. I'll put it that way. And shout out to Matt Early. Shout out to Craig. He says, thoughts on Stephie Bull going to the big house? Yeah, somebody actually asked me about this a few streams back. And I'll kind of reiterate what I said then. Boxing has always been full of criminals. It emerged from the criminal world, professional boxing, right? And it has maintained a strong criminal presence within it. Perhaps the criminal presence, and this is arguable, by the way, but I'm just going to entertain this idea that perhaps the criminal presence isn't as mainstream in boxing as it used to be, but it's still prevalent on the small hall shows and so on. So many of these small hall promoters have got criminal ties. I mean, speaking about boxers I've known personally and gyms I've been to and been associated with personally in the past, all of them had criminal, well, let me not say all the gyms, because some of the amateur gyms, I weren't aware of them having criminal ties, but all of the professional boxers I've personally known had some type of criminal ties, right? Either through management, somebody funded them, all of them, yeah? Because at the end of the day, boxing is a working class sport. Most fighters come from working class backgrounds, and criminals gravitate towards boxers because they can live vicariously through them, because your average criminal isn't necessarily a good fighter, right? So they like to live vicariously through the fighters in their local neighborhood. And also, some of these local criminals, they kind of like to be able to pull rank on their local fighters. You know what I mean? Put their arm around them and let them know on a subliminal level, okay, yeah, you can fight, but understand I'm still your daddy. You know, like that. I grew up around people like that where, again, the local criminals would gravitate towards the boxers and whatnot, but they would still let them know, you're below me in the pecking order around here. Do you understand? A lot of them like to do that type of thing. So, yeah, shout out to Matt, though, for the super chat. Shout out to Craig, for the Stephie Bull super chat. So, yeah, long story short, I'm not at all surprised that Stephie Bull's got popped for what he's popped for. You know, I say popped, making it sound like he's doing PEDs. He was selling stuff, right, that he shouldn't have been selling. Not at all surprised, because boxing's always been like that. And having grown up in an environment where there was lots of that going on, knowing professional boxers over the years, going to small old shows, it was like full of criminals. I mean, like local criminals and whatever who were involved, particularly in management, because in boxing, there's basically no barrier to entry. Anybody can become a manager. And so you get a lot of these, not just ex-criminals, but current people who are still in the criminal world involving themselves in boxing management and boxing promotion. It's very, very common. Worldwide, right? In every country you go to, you're going to find the same thing. The criminal fraternity are deeply embedded in boxing and other combat sports. So, yeah, shout out to Craig. I'm not surprised about the Stephie Bull thing. Stephie Bull, obviously a former pro himself. Can't imagine he made much money from his pro career. He got beat by Amir Khan and what have you. So, yeah. Big up Craig. Big up Matt. He says, thoughts on P. Diddy getting most of his case closed? Does that show a failure in the judicial system in the USA or just how money wins overall? In my opinion, neither of those things. None of the above. I think it shows how weak the prosecution's case was. I'm no lawyer. I'm no expert on these kind of things. But from the details I heard, it was a very weak case. So many of the charges just seemed trumped up and, it just seemed very weak to me. So I'm not surprised that he's being convicted, I think, on 2 counts, and on the other counts, he's beat him. I'm not surprised by that. And I personally do think that there's something to Diddy suing that liquor company and then immediately having all these allegations come out against him. It's not like the allegations are made up and they're all fake necessarily. It's just that, in my opinion, in order to reach that level, it's like the line in the Denzel Washington movie, Training Day. You got to have a little bit of dirt on you for anybody to trust you in the entertainment industry. If you ain't got dirt on you, they ain't going to let you ascend above a certain level. Do you understand? Because they want to be able to control you and make sure that you don't start going against the establishment. And I think that right there, what Diddy did, suing that company and winning, oh dear, he didn't realize that, how can I put it? He got ideas above his station. He thought he was more powerful than he was. And they reined him in real quick. So, Diddy is a weirdo without a shadow of a doubt. And just a pretty disgusting individual all around. But based upon the charges that I saw, again, I'm no lawyer, but they seemed trumped up to me. So I'm not surprised. Shout out to Kieran Malcolm for the super chat. He says, bless up, Hatman, hope you're good. Who wins this fantasy fight in your opinion? Prime Marvin Hagler versus middleweight James Toney. That's a great fight. That's a great fight. I'd actually go with James Toney. James Toney was the slicker of the two. He was naturally bigger. Marvin Hagler was a middleweight, yes. And James Toney started out as a middleweight, but actually, I forget when same-day weigh-ins was scrapped. It was sometime during my lifetime when they switched from same-day weigh-ins and then they moved the weigh-ins back. It might have been sometime in the 90s. But either way, James Toney was a much bigger guy than Marvin Hagler. They were a similar height. James Toney might have been a shade taller, but he was a naturally heavier guy. I mean, he went all the way up to heavyweight, right? James Toney. Obviously, with the assistance of roids and whatnot. He got popped for roids. I think it was for the Ruiz fight. But even at cruiserweight, right, against Jirov, he was at light heavyweight, so on and so forth. So both were fantastic fighters. But I want to say, in fact, I want to say James Toney, but James Toney was really better at super middleweight than he was at middleweight. Middleweight, he struggled a little bit to make the weight, although he did put in that great performance against Michael Nunn and whatnot. But yeah, I'm going to go with James Toney. I just think that slicker style than Hagler, very sharp counter punching. He'll stay in the pocket with you. He's not a guy to need to be running around the ring like Sugar Ray Leonard. He'll stay right there with you, catch and shoot at a very fast pace, And James Toney, because he was so relaxed in the ring, he could fight all day long. Where's the fight where you've ever seen James Toney gassed? Even when he was fat, like way overweight at heavyweight, he still had better stamina than most of his opponents, should I say. So, and by the way, James Toney is a guy who used to spar and do very little else in the gym. He hated hitting the bag. In fact, you can see many interviews online where James Toney said after his first coach, Pops Miller, after he split with him, he never hit the bag anymore. He literally did not do any bag work. Maybe a little bit of mitts, but the vast majority of what he would do was sparring. He'd just be in the gym sparring all day. And that's probably why he's so punch drunk now. You know, he can barely string a sentence together because not only did he have loads of pro fights and quite a few amateur fights, but the amount of sparring that he's done over the years, and he would spar anybody in the gym, heavyweights, cruiserweights, whatever. He didn't care. He would spar anybody. And he was doing that for years and years and years. So, yeah, James Toney. I go James Toney over Hagler when Toney was at his best. He was a formidable opponent. So shout out to Kieran. Big up Matt for the super chat. He says, who is a top fighter in history that's massively overrated aside from Tyson? I wasn't big on Hagler. Again, I want to clarify what I mean when I say somebody's overrated. Because a lot of people use the term overrated as a pejorative. So when they say overrated, what they're saying is that guy's rubbish. He's no good. I don't use the term that way. When I say overrated, I mean not as good as the general consensus would have you believe. That's all I mean. The fighter might still be very good, an all-time great even, just not quite as good as the general consensus would have you believe. That's all right? So I don't want to sound like I'm being disrespectful towards certain fighters because I still rate them highly. I just think that they're not quite as good. I think people get carried away sometimes with certain fighters. But the fighter that I will pick is, and you've mentioned Tyson there. I'm not sure if you're talking about Mike Tyson or Rocky Marciano, because Mike Tyson's certainly one of them. I would say Mike Tyson is generally overrated. His fans are extremely cult-like. Have you ever come across a hardcore Mike Tyson fan? It's as if they're in a cult. And stuff that Kevin Rooney said or Costamato said, they take it as gospel. Like, you literally can't question it, or they say, well, you're crazy. No. You can question anything, especially if it's just an opinion. So, for example, Kevin Rooney said that if Mike Tyson hadn't left him, Tyson would have gone 100-0. I mean, give it a rest. Of course, Kevin Rooney would say that because of his own ego. He wants to believe that if Rooney had stayed with him, that if Tyson had stayed with him, he would have gone 100-0. Of course, Rooney wants to believe that. Everyone's got an ego, bro. Do you know what I mean? So, Mike Tyson is fantastic as he was. He's my favorite heavyweight of all time to watch from an entertainment standpoint. But I do think that his fans go overboard in terms of how highly they rate him. And another one would be Rocky Marciano. Since you said other than Tyson, I would say Rocky Marciano. Rocky Marciano did well for his time, but the idea that a man who was in the mid-180s could compete with latter 20th century and 21st century heavyweights? No. Not in my opinion, not at all. The guy literally weighed under 190 pounds for a lot of his fights. I don't see it. I do not see it. So, yeah, I'll give you two there. Mike Tyson and also Rocky Marciano. For me, nah. They're overrated. Very good fighters, particularly Mike Tyson, a great fighter, but the fans go a little overboard. So, shout out to Matt again. All right, so we're going to get into the topics now. For those who have just joined, no, we haven't yet gone in on Partridge. We're going to go in on him. Shout out to everybody in the chat, encircled. Blair Henry, Josh, JR, Enki, Ali, Tyler, Afro Jam, Jay Silva. Ben says Hagler was tiny. Yeah, he was. He was small. They're weighing in on the day of the fight back then. Big up Chili Beef. Who else we got in here? V. Ayed. Soul Rebel. All right, so let's get into the topics here. I'll come back to the live chat once we got through these topics. Big up Hussein. Big up Jelly Mode. So first and foremost, this just got announced. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn 2, September 20th in London. Now, there seems to be some confusion because Eddie Hearn, and he's kind of grinning and smirking when he's coming out with all this stuff. But he said he received a phone call from Ben Shalom after this announcement was made on Ring Magazine, social media, and whatever, Turkey Al Sheikh. And he said that Ben Shalom basically insulted him when he picked up the phone and made out as though Eddie Hearn was the one who had this fight announced and confirmed for that date without informing Ben Shalom and Team Eubank. Eddie Hearn then proceeded to say that he's had correspondence with Team Eubank who have basically distanced themselves from Shalom and said that he is not represented by any promoter. He's basically an independent individual. But Ben Shalom, in this conversation with Eddie Hearn, apparently said to Eddie, well, me and Eubank are partners. So I'm not his promoter, but we're partners. I don't know what that actually means contractually. And I said this at the time when Eubank Jr. signed with Ben Shalom because the language was very specifically worded to say a partnership rather than a promotional deal. It didn't say Eubank Jr. signs with. It said they've signed a partnership together. Words to that effect. And that's very curious to me because, again, we're all left to speculate what exactly that means. Whether the contract is materially different from a standard contract where you sign with a promoter, or whether it's just semantics from Eubank Jr. because he wants to sound more important than he actually is. I've got no idea. But I want to say that I usually side with fighters when they come into conflict with promoters. And promoters will, even if they have rivalries with each other, often back each other when it comes to disputes with fighters. In some instances, at least, because they want to maintain a certain status quo where promoters can get away with treating fighters in a particular way. Do you understand what I mean? With that being said, there are obviously going to be some fighters who take the biscuit. There are going to be some fighters who actually are trying to treat the promoters unfairly, as unlikely as that might sound to some. There are going to be certain fighters who actually take advantage, all right? I know it sounds crazy, a fighter taking advantage of a promoter, but some fighters, many of them perhaps, are very egotistical and not necessarily the most straight people to deal with in business. They might have an extremely elevated view of themselves, grandiose perspective on themselves, and therefore overvalue themselves. You see what I'm saying? I wonder whether that's going on with Chris Eubank Jr. Because the guy's fallen out with how many promoters now? Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn, Kalle Sauerland. Is he going to fall out with Ben Shalom as well? Now, perhaps I'm misreading the whole situation and it's just that all the promoters like Eubank Jr. said at that press conference are scumbags. And to some extent, I have to imagine they all are. But there are levels of scumbag. You know, it's like Jarrell Miller. He's been calling Dimitri Salita a scumbag and much worse. And it may be true, but it's not hard to entertain the possibility that Jarrell Miller might be an even bigger scumbag than Salita. You know, just because fighters go in the ring and show bravery, a lot of them at least, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily good people. It doesn't mean they're necessarily honest or fair people. Certainly Jarrell Miller isn't an honest or fair person, is he? Even though he's very funny and what have you, you trust that man at your peril. He is a very, very dishonest individual. So, yeah, that's my take on the Eubank Jr. Conor Benn fight being announced. My feelings on the fight actually taking place, never mind the background. It's not a fight I wanted to see in the first place, even though it did turn out to be a good scrap. I always thought it was a weird fight. I preferred to see Conor Benn pursue world honors at 147 pounds, even 154. And once the first fight was out of the way, I can't say, well, I definitely am not alone in wanting it to be a one and done situation. Gareth A. Davis has been very vocal about that as well, saying he would have preferred it to be a one and done, move on with their careers. It's not like the first fight was controversial. I thought Eubank Jr. won it pretty comfortably in the end. Yeah, it was competitive and Conor Benn was dangerous early, but in the end, Eubank Jr.'s experience, size, and what have you won the day for him. So in my mind, I was like, okay, you've had your fun. It's been an entertaining night with seeing you coming out and all that type of stuff. Good scrap. But let's move on now. Because having a rematch is going to be damaging for both guys. Damaging for Eubank Jr. if they can't get this rehydration limit scrapped. So there's serious danger there for him, continuing to make not only 160, but with the rehydration limit. I know he signed up for it. I don't know the backstory of how he ended up signing up for it. And what I mean by that is, when dealing with the Saudis, the fighters teams don't negotiate with each other directly. So what if, and I'm not saying this happened, but what if Eubank Jr. signed his deal with the Saudis, first of all, but there was some type of clause whereby he had to go ahead with the fight irrespective of what was on the other end of the deal. And perhaps the Saudis could amend certain aspects of Eubank's deal to make the fight go ahead. Again, I've got no idea whether that's the case. It's just pure speculation. I'm just wondering, because it seems curious that Eubank Jr. would agree to the rehydration clause. Remember when they came out in the run-up to the first fight and said Eubank was upset about a rehydration clause being in the contract? Why not just reject it then? Why accept it? Yeah, there's money and all that type of business, but your health is your wealth. If he'd stood firm and said no rehydration clause, I'm pretty sure Benn still would have took the fight. So it's as if there's some leverage somewhere that kind of, again, maybe this is a misreading of it by me. I have no inside information, okay? But I don't know, I just wonder whether there's some leverage that somebody had over Eubank Jr. before the first fight to get him to agree to the rehydration limit, not only for the first fight, but for any rematch. So, yeah, the rematch, the rehydration thing, I'm not comfortable with it. I think it's dangerous. And also for Conor Benn, he's in there against the middleweight taking all this damage. Not good for him either. He's still young enough to make a proper run at it at 147. And with Boots Ennis moving up, it's a weak division. Okay, they got Devin Haney, Brian Norman. They're still unproven, 147 pounds. It's wide open right now with Boots Ennis moving up. Perfect time for Conor Benn to go ahead and pick up a world title, right? And actually, Eddie Hearn, after the first fight, sounded as though he wanted to go in that direction, but then was told by Turki Al-Sheikh, whoa, hang on. We've got a contracted rematch. So how much of this situation is actually the fighters wanting to go ahead with it, and how much of it is actually being imposed by the Saudis because they've got this contracted rematch? So I don't know. Just throwing it out there. But those are my feelings. I don't particularly want the rematch to go ahead. I don't think there's any need for it. But there you go. Give me your thoughts in the comments, in the live chat. Shout out to Matt. Matt says, last question. If Catterall loses to Harlem Eubank, does that take away the luster of Teofimo Lopez's win against Barboza? That's a good question. Well, styles make fights. And this fight is at 147. Jack Catterall says he could still make 140 easily. If you take those things into consideration, then maybe not. Maybe it wouldn't take so much luster off Teofimo's win over Barboza. Because Harlem Eubank's been at welterweight for a while now, a couple of fights. It isn't a million years ago that he was at 140 himself, to be fair. But you could use that argument maybe. But no, I want to say that Teo's win over Barboza was a good win because of how dominant he was. So even if Harlem Eubank beats Jack Catterall, and I don't think he will, by the way, I think Jack Catterall wins that fight. But even if Harlem Eubank were to win, again, you can say, well, it was at a higher weight for Catterall. And even though Barboza beat Catterall, Barboza didn't beat, even though Barboza beat Catterall, it was a close fight, right? So you could say that Catterall and Barboza are on a similar level. Both good fighters. But Teo went in there and just totally dominated Barboza from start to finish. So yeah, shout out to Matt. Big up Shush for the super chat. He says, Turkey just posted Usyk Fury 2026. Oh no. Oh no. Shout out to D-Dubs. We'll come back onto that. In fact, let me try and get that up here. Let me see if I can get that up. Is it on his Instagram or is he posted it on X? Let's have a look here. Looking at his Insta, I don't see anything about Partridge on here. I'll check the Ring Magazine Insta. See if it's on there. Maybe it's just on his X account. Oh no, hang on. Oh no. Oh, hang on. Yeah, here it is. Ring Magazine. Tyson Fury is set to come out of retirement and return to boxing in 2026. Turki Al-Sheikh has confirmed. Al-Sheikh said, I talked with him and I have his word to have him in Riyadh season in 2026. We have a rabbit hunt. Oh my God. I hope Turki Al-Sheikh is going to make him fight his way to a title shot. But it's questionable because the WBC came out the other day and said Tyson Fury, when he comes out of retirement, will get made mandatory for their belt immediately, which is a shocker. But it's typical of the WBC, isn't it? They've got this ridiculous legacy privilege thing with certain ex-champions who are just given carte blanche, you know? Terrible stuff. We'll come back onto this because in fact we have to do a dedicated stream about this next time because this is a shocker. Please, no. But obviously Usyk has to play ball. If Usyk just gives Tyson Fury a shot, I mean, if he still holds onto the WBC belt, let's say he beats Dubois and he's still keeping hold of that WBC belt, he might have Fury imposed upon him by the WBC, you know? He might not have a choice. In that scenario, I hope Usyk just gives the belt up and tells Fury, if you want another shot at me, earn it. You go fight Dubois. You go fight whoever, Hrgovic, AJ. Go fight some people first. Earn your shot, your third fight with me. I've already beaten you twice. Big up to Shush for that bit of information right there. We'll definitely come back onto that. Shout out to Seamus McMichael. He says, what's your next career review? Next career review is probably going to be Nigel Benn. Yep, Nigel Benn. Shout out to Cash for the super chat. He says, I wouldn't mind Fury going 0-3 against Usyk. He would be to Usyk what Chisora is to him. Easy money. But you know, an aging fighter like Usyk in a division full of giants, anything can happen. Fury could land a big shot from somewhere and against the run of play, Usyk loses the fight. I would be disappointed in Usyk if he gave Tyson Fury the opportunity. To be honest, I'd be disappointed in him. I'd be critical of him if he gave Fury that opportunity. Fury don't deserve that. He's lost twice. Not only has he lost twice, but he's given Usyk no credit. One thing beating a man twice, but when he don't give you any credit, for beating him fair and square twice. Why are you giving him another opportunity? Do you know what I mean? Nah. Anyway, we'll come back onto that. Jake Paul calling out Anthony Joshua, among others. Tyson Fury coming out saying it's a 50-50 between AJ and Jake Paul, which is trolling of the highest order. And maybe even gaslighting by Tyson Fury of the highest order. Trying to diminish AJ even further than he has been diminished in the ring with ridiculous comments like that. But Jake Paul, at the press conference after his win over Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., said that he wants to fight Anthony Joshua in the back end of 2026. Now, this to me just sounds like clout chasing. Because first of all, AJ was looking for an opponent earlier on this year, and they were entertaining the Jake Paul fight. And then Jake Paul, on several occasions, Dwyer actually got this wrong. Dwyer thought, for some reason, that it was AJ that wanted to fight sometime next year. But no, AJ and Hearn were saying they wanted to fight this year with Jake Paul because they've got some free time with no other opponents on the horizon. And at the time, Jake Paul was saying, no, I don't want it this year. I want it early next year. And now after the win over Chavez Jr., he says he wants it late next year, at the end of next year. What is all that about? AJ's on his last legs. Why would you need to wait to the end of next year? Well, it's obvious. Jake Paul's either not serious about the fight at all, he's just using AJ's name for clout, or, and perhaps it's a bit of both, he's waiting to see if AJ deteriorates even further. And the more he deteriorates, of course, the more safe that fight becomes for him. In his mind, perhaps. So, yeah, Jake Paul doing what he does. At the end of the day, this guy was famous and successful from social media, from YouTube, long before he ever laced up a pair of boxing gloves. So he understands the game. He knows how to create a Twitter storm. He knows how to garner attention from the public. He was doing that professionally, very successfully, before he ever became a boxer. So he's just bringing those skills, if you want to call them that, from the social media world into his boxing career by naming all these people and making it sound real grandiose and what have you. But in reality, he's probably going to fight Tommy Fury again or KSI. That's probably what it's going to be. Shout out to Cash. Yeah, I did read out his super chat, but he was saying, wouldn't mind seeing Fury going 0-3 against Usyk. Yeah, for one, I'd be disappointed that Usyk would give him that opportunity without Fury earning it. And anything can happen in heavyweight boxing. And for two, I think in the heavyweight division there are too many rematches. Not just regarding Fury and Usyk, but Fury and Wilder, Joshua and Usyk. You know, just too many rematches in this era. Far too many. If Usyk wants to continue, and I think he should retire now. Never mind the Dubois fight. If he gets past Dubois, I certainly think he should retire after that. But if he's going to continue, I don't want to see his next move be a trilogy match with Fury. We've done the Fury stuff to death. You know what I mean? Let Partridge actually fight his way to a title shot instead of trying to leapfrog everybody with the assistance of Mauricio Sulaiman. All right, so we'll just spend a few minutes or less talking about Dave Allen here. He posted this video on his social media. You guys can see it on screen. Some still shots from it. Shadow boxing in his backyard. Look at the gut. Now, Dave Allen's never been a body beautiful type. We know that. And he was heavy against Johnny Fisher in the rematch. But he's been linked to fights with the likes of Joseph Parker, Deontay Wilder, as well as the Jamie TKVs of the world. And I think there might be one or two other big name heavyweights that have apparently expressed interest in fighting Dave Allen. Look, boxing is not a body beautiful competition. We've seen fat fighters beat the living daylights out of chiseled fighters like Anthony Joshua in the past. It happens. But we know Dave Allen. We know what he can do and what he can't do, or at least we think we do. I think I do. And as pedestrian as Deontay Wilder looked against Terrell Herndon, and I said this in my post-fight review, I still pick Deontay Wilder over Dave Allen. Dave Allen beat Johnny Fisher. Folks, Johnny Fisher was an area level fighter. Is an area level fighter. That's what he is. He was an Essex ticket seller. A gimmick fighter, really. That's who Dave Allen went in and beat. He didn't go in there and beat a Deontay Wilder. Do not think that a Deontay Wilder is in the same category as Johnny Fisher. All right? Even now, even as diminished as Wilder is, no. So, I would certainly pick Deontay Wilder to beat Dave Allen. Even now, looking at the state of Dave Allen here, look at the belly. This guy puts on ridiculous amounts of weight. Yes, he was fat against Fisher, but he's maybe 14, 15, maybe even 20 pounds heavier here than he was against Johnny Fisher. Look at the size of his belly. This guy literally after fights, I mean, he would have made a decent amount from that Johnny Fisher rematch. Bro, he's sitting on the couch with like a 2-liter bottle of Coca-Cola, Kentucky Fried Chicken, chocolates and all this type of stuff. And these type of guys, like Dave Allen, he's gone in there against Johnny Fisher, overweight, right? And we know Dave Allen's clearly an overeater. He is clearly addicted to gluttony, yeah? The worst thing that can happen to a gluttonous fighter is for them to get a big win and everyone praise them and everyone be patting them on the back. Because then they're thinking to themselves, I don't need to watch my food so much because I went into the last fight fat and I still won. This is how their minds work. They're always looking to try and make excuses for why they should be allowed to pig out. I mean, it's a free world. Well, it's not really a free world, but you know what I mean. You're free to eat whatever you want to eat. But when you're a professional boxer, there are consequences to being gluttonous. It's not that there's anything morally wrong with you, at least not from my perspective, because you want to eat a load of junk and whatever. Do you? But there will be consequences for you professionally when you conduct yourself like this at home. And I don't see a guy as slow-footed as Dave Allen going in there and beating Deontay Wilder right now. I might give Dave Allen, again, 40%, 35% chance against Wilder. No more than that. 40 tops. Maybe more like 35. I'd make Wilder the favorite. I think Wilder still has enough speed. He's not as fast as he used to be. He doesn't have the same snap on his shots as he used to have. But he's got enough know-how now, after all the experience, after all the fighters he's been in with. I think he's got enough to deal with Dave Allen. So, I know there are others who disagree. That's okay. I might be wrong. If Wilder and Allen do fight, who knows? Maybe Dave Allen pulls off the victory. But looking at him here, nah, bro. What you're supposed to be doing after beating Johnny Fisher is using that as a springboard, building momentum for your career. And that has to include staying in shape, staying in some kind of shape, improving your shape even. You see, some fighters go into certain fights and they say, oh, I lost too much weight. I didn't feel strong in there. Maybe Dave Allen felt that going into the first Johnny Fisher fight. But you know what? That's because you've tried to lose too much weight too quickly. The key is you get your body used to being lighter. You get your body used to a reduced number of calories. It takes time. You see? But Dave Allen is stuck in this pattern of gluttony and, you know, the psychology of that and what have you. I don't see the guy beating Deontay Wilder, bro. I don't see it. I'll be picking Wilder strongly in that fight to beat Dave Allen, probably on points. All right, let's move on to next topic of discussion here. Tyson Fury. Now, I can probably get this up, actually. Let's get this up first to deal with this first, because we did just talk about it briefly a moment ago. Turki Al-Sheikh has announced that Tyson Fury is coming back. All right. In a conversation. Is there any kind of contract, though? Because Tyson Fury can go back on his word so easily. And Fury has kind of insinuated, certainly his dad has insinuated, that the Saudis stitched him up by having Usyk win both those fights. That's what's been insinuated, which is a silly thing. But if Tyson Fury genuinely believes that, then maybe he can make a false promise to Turki and say, oh yeah, I'm going to come back. And then when Turki says, okay, I'm going to send you a contract, Fury goes missing. You know, like that. Maybe he wants to try and get back at Turki. Who knows? But let me get the poster up on screen. Just get it out for you guys here. Download it first rather than using a screenshot and having to crop it and all that nonsense. All right, here we go. What is wrong with this JPEG? Why is it not displaying properly? Okay, there we go. So this is it. All right, breaking news from Turki Al-Sheikh. Actually, this still ain't displaying properly. What's going on? Have I got the wrong image up here? Maybe I have. Where's it gone? Okay, no, there's just some text with this, which isn't part of the image. So to read you the text, it says, and this is via Ring Magazine on their Instagram account, Tyson Fury is set to come out of retirement and return to boxing in 2026. Turki Al-Sheikh has confirmed. Al-Sheikh said, I talked with him and I have his word to have him in Riyadh season in 2026. We have a rabbit hunt. All right, those are the words of Turki Al-Sheikh. All he has is Tyson Fury's word, and Tyson Fury's word ain't worth a penny. I'm old enough to remember half pennies. Back in the 1980s, they still had half pennies. It's not even worth half a penny. Tyson Fury's word. So maybe it's a slow news day for the ring, the same way it's a slow news day for me. But Tyson Fury's word don't mean anything. We need to hear contracts are signed, opponents are announced, dates, venues, before we can even start considering that Tyson Fury is actually going to commit to anything. And even then he can pull out. The guy's pulled out a ridiculous number of times. I mean, I was going to say something crazy then. Held myself back for the sake of the algorithm. Ayed says half pennies. Really? Yeah, there was half pennies in my day. In the olden days, oh yes, there were half pennies. Anybody else in their 40s and above from the UK? Anyone else remember half pennies? There was actually a notorious gangster from Brixton who used to go by the name Half a Penny. He's no longer alive. He used to go by the name Half a Penny because his brother was called Penny, and the younger brother was called Half a Penny. And the money used to be so big back in the days. During the war, yeah, like Uncle Albert, that's right, from Only Fools and Horses. Encircled says, dang, Hatman, you old. They stopped in 84. But they were still circulating after 84. They were still circulating long after 84, because I never arrived in the UK until later on in the 80s. I wasn't in the UK in 84. But they were still circulating. Were they legal tender still? I can't remember if they were legal tender, but I definitely remember half pennies in the 80s in the UK. 100%. They were still knocking around. East Midlands Fight Fan says, I remember half pennies. Yup. Yep. I remember them very clearly. And the money was so big back then. The coins were big. You guys remember how big coins were back in the 80s? They were massive. The 50 pence was enormous. The 2 pence was enormous. All the pennies were like proper massive. Even the notes were massive. A £50 note was damn near the size of an A4 sheet. I'm exaggerating a bit here. I'm doing a partridge, exaggerating, but you know, for comedic effect. The £50 note was enormous. Even the 20s, the 10s, all the money was much bigger. The notes were bigger. The pennies were bigger, everything. The coins, were bigger, everything. That's right, East Midlands Fight Fan. Yeah, used to be able to buy sweets, a penny, half a penny, all that type of stuff. Yeah. Bus was 10p, oh, the good old days. See, I'm not the only geriatric in this conversation right now. There are other geriatrics in the stream. Look at that. So anyway, Tyson Fury giving Turki Al-Sheikh his word that he's going to come back and fight on a Riyadh season card in 2026. Tyson Fury's word ain't worth nothing. I'm more interested in what he's saying here, which is pushing more of his silly propaganda about being robbed in both Usyk fights. He said, they only want a fair fight. It's obvious I won both those fights. Blah, 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 blah. He said, it's obvious to anyone in boxing, and everyone knows I won both those fights. I'm going to come on to his brother Shane Fury in a second, but what Tyson Fury is doing here is hoping that by repetitiously repeating this nonsense about him winning both fights and getting robbed, that eventually people are going to start to believe it. That's what he's doing. See, Tyson Fury, I don't know whether it's because of his upbringing, with his dad and whatnot, but this guy understands a lot about psychology. I'm sure he's never read a book about psychology in his life, but all of us, indirectly or passively, study psychology day in, day out from the moment that we're born. Because we have to deal with other human beings, and we have to pick up on social cues. And over time, you get to understand, okay, this person is probably thinking this. You know, we get to deduce a person's psychological and emotional state from their behavior. If we didn't have this ability, if we didn't develop these skills, then when you saw somebody crying and in distress, you would walk up to them and make a joke about sleeping with their mum at a very inappropriate time. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a time and a place, and you have to have this discernment. Some people call it emotional intelligence, right? So we all indirectly, passively study psychology throughout the course of our lives in the normal course of human interactions. And it just so happens that Tyson Fury, when it comes to psychology, he's very good at the skullduggerous, deceptive aspects of psychology. Him and his dad, but particularly Tyson. Because his dad's so on the nose that he's a bit cavemanish. Tyson's a bit more subtle and crafty and better at being devious with his psychology. And like I say, what he's trying to do here is actually a classic propaganda technique that governments have been using since time immemorial. I think it was Goebbels, the propaganda minister or whatever he was for the Nazis, who said words to this effect: make the lie big and continue repeating it, and eventually people will believe it. That's what Tyson Fury's going for here. Everybody knows that I won the fight. Both fights with Usyk, it's a daylight robbery and this and that. Repeat, 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 hoping that it burns into the public psyche and people start thinking, oh, maybe he did get robbed. Like that. That's what he's doing. And also, he doesn't want to fight anybody other than Usyk. He said that today as well. He would only come back for Usyk because, as I've been saying time and time again, If he can't be seen as the number one heavyweight in the world, the very least he can accept is being seen as the number two. If he were to fight whoever, let's say Ajit Kabayel, Philip Ergovich, you name him, Moses Itauma. If he was to fight anyone other than even Anthony Joshua, if he fought him, if he was to fight anyone other than Usyk and lose, he no longer has that supposed number two position in the heavyweight division anymore. And that would be too much for Tyson Fury's ego to take. He couldn't take that. That's why he wants everyone to focus on him fighting Usyk again. He doesn't want there to be any pressure on him to fight Anthony Joshua. That's why he's not mentioning Joshua. This is all psychology. And I'll show you what I use that particular form of psychology when it comes to YouTube. Because there have been many channels who have called me out over the years, much smaller channels, little scrubs, hoping to draw me into some type of back and forth with them because they know it will bring loads of attention to their channel. You see it? So I've never responded to a channel that's attacked me, one of these small channels. The only way I would respond is if it was a bigger channel, because then it benefits me. If a bigger channel starts having a go at me, yeah, I may well respond. But if a smaller channel, no, I'm not going to respond. Because it's only going to benefit them, it's not going to benefit me. And that is what Tyson Fury is doing here by not talking about Anthony Joshua, not talking about anybody other than Alexander Usyk. He doesn't want to feel pressured by the public into fighting anybody else. It's all about image for Mr. Luke Partridge here. Yeah? He wants to preserve this image that he's at least the number two in the division, but that all goes out the window if he loses to somebody else. So he doesn't even want to be associated with any other names than Usyk. That's what's going on. And to dismantle the narrative that Tyson Fury's pushing here, we turn once again to his brother Shane. This was shortly after the first fight with Alexander Usyk. Shane Fury did an interview with IFL TV. Last I checked, the interview is still up. This might have been conducted a week or two after, maybe even a month after that fight. Shane Fury was asked what he thought about it, and he said, I've watched the fight back since, and I thought Usyk won. This is Tyson's brother, not his half-brother, like Tommy Fury, same parents, grew up with him, was there in Saudi to support him, ringside, cheering him on. That guy has turned round after re-watching the fight and said, my brother lost to Usyk, fair and square. He said at the time when he was in the arena, he thought Tyson had won it because, of course, he's caught up in the emotion of the whole thing. He's hyper-focusing on Fury's successes, and his mind is blocking out Usyk's successes or diminishing Usyk's successes. That's natural when you're there to support somebody. But if you can detach your emotion and rewatch the fight in the cold light of day, it can look a whole lot different, as it did for Shane Fury when he did just that. How do you explain this, Mr. Luke Partridge, that your own brother Shane says that you lost, at least that first fight? How do the Partridge fanboys explain this? They never can. They try and change the subject. In fact, let me tell you what the Partridge fanboys do whenever you bring up this fact that Shane Fury had Usyk winning the first fight. What they do is they start talking about Anthony Joshua. It's like, what does Anthony Joshua have to do with Usyk beating Fury? Absolutely nothing, right? But it's the desperation tactics from the Partridge fanboys, which are just deflection tactics. Yeah, they deflect. Since they can't reconcile the fact that Shane said that Usyk beat his brother, they can't reconcile that with the perception they have. Then, in desperation, let's just deflect. Let's talk about Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua's got nothing to do with nothing. These Partridge fanboys are something else. So, yeah, Shane Fury, if any Partridge fanboy tries to run this rubbish about Tyson got robbed, just send them a link to Shane Fury saying this. And see what their reaction is. I bet you 9 times out of 10 they just start talking about Anthony Joshua. They can't actually address it. They'll start talking about AJ. In another interview, well, it was all really the same interview because it was like a media scrum, but some outlets have got more of this scrum than others. This one's on the Boxing Scene YouTube channel, which I'm now subscribed to. Got a YouTube channel, by the way. Fury saying, I'll only come back for Usyk. We talked about that. Shout out to Wee Warrior. He says, under a clip of this on TikTok, someone said there's no way Fury lost those 2 fights. He said, my scorecards were wrong and told others to rewatch. The Partridge fanboys are traumatized. You know, for one, you can send them to the Shane Fury interview. For 2, you can send them to not only the CompuBox numbers for both fights, but also the Jabber numbers. 2 completely separate, independent punch stat companies. Both had Usyk outlanding Fury in both fights. So, and it's not like you should be scoring a fight based on punch stats, of course, because they can't account for the quality of punches, so on and so forth. But if the fights were a robbery, if both fights were robberies, then how on earth could Usyk have outlanded him in both fights if they were robbery? That doesn't compute. At the very least, if somebody has outlanded you in the majority of the rounds and overall in both fights, at the absolute best you can hope to claim is that both fights were close. That's the best you can hope to claim. To try and claim that they were robberies is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous, man. Your own brother said you got beat. 2 separate punch stat companies in Jabber and CompuBox had Usyk outlanded you in most of the rounds in both fights. Come on, man. And yet these Partridge fanboys are talking about, the scorecard. It's incredible. So shout out to Wee Warrior, reminding us of how psychotic the Partridge fanboys have become now. Absolutely psychotic. Indeed, a lot of Fury's punches were not scoring shots. I find that the Jabber punch stats were actually more accurate than the CompuBox punch stats. Both had Usyk outlanding Fury in both fights, but Jabber had Usyk outlanding Fury with high impact punches more significantly. And in professional boxing, you score rounds to whoever lands the most clean, effective blows. Because with CompuBox, they just divide it up between jabs and power shots and body shots, right? But if you literally flick your right hand at somebody with no power on it, that counts as a power shot. You see what I'm saying? It just grazes his forehead with a little flicking right hand, and Fury throws a lot of them kind of shots. That counts as a power shot. But with Jabber, they've got this high impact category where that would not count as a high impact punch. Even though it's technically a power shot because it's with the backhand, it don't count as high impact. High impact is when it actually makes a high impact on the target. That's right, Dr. Wu. Fury tried to bluff his way to a breather, and he's not the only one, to be fair. I mean, heavyweights tend to get knackered when they're fighting Alexander Usyk. And by the way, the next film study, I just did a film study on my Patreon page of all the main fights of the weekend just gone. So I did a film study on Floyd Schofield's knockout of Tevin Farmer, of Christian and Billy's knockout of Selecki, of Zerdo Ramirez's fight against Dorticos, Jake Paul's fight against Chavez, and so on. So I did a film study at all those fights on my Patreon. That's the last film study I uploaded. So I'm going through the actual fight footage and analyzing certain things and slowing certain sequences down to explain what I think is going on. But the next film study I'm going to do on Patreon will be Alexander Usyk versus Daniel Dubois 1. I'm going to be going through that round by round, pointing out certain technical things in the video, okay, analyzing the actual video footage, my Patreon page. Because Usyk tires these guys out, not just physically, but in particular psychologically. And that was certainly the case for Daniel Dubois. He was psychologically scrambled and overwhelmed by the end of that fight. That's what Usyk does to you. That's what he does to you. Because heavyweights are used to catching a breather here and there, slowing the pace down. They're used to silent agreements with people. That's a term that Teddy Atlas came up with back in the 1980s when Mike Tyson was fighting. He said that a lot of Mike Tyson opponents would enter into silent agreements with him. On the inside, they would both agree to clinch because they were scared that if they hit Mike Tyson on the inside, that he would open up on them. And they didn't want him to open up. They didn't want to get him mad. So they'll make these silent agreements because Mike Tyson used to fight in bursts, even in his prime. He was never a guy that had a really high punch output, Mike Tyson. He was not a Joe Frazier. He would come out with a lot of shots in the first 3 or 4 rounds. Then he would settle down to quite a measured pace, quite a methodical pace after 3 or 4 rounds, Mike Tyson, if you've ever watched him in his prime. And it would just be occasional bursts of shots. But for a lot of the fights, he'd be laying around on the inside, not doing much. That's how Mike Tyson would fight in his prime. Go back and watch. Never mind the highlights and all that kind of business. You watch a prime Mike Tyson, if he don't get you out in the first 3 or 4 rounds, he slows right down, and there's a lot of clinching on the inside with him initiating a lot of the clinching. A lot of the kind of mauling and leaning on and all that type of stuff. While he catches a breather, Mike Tyson actually admitted that he used to do that to catch a breather because he said throughout his career he had some kind of lung problem that he had since he was a kid. So he would kind of laze around on the inside, not doing much, and then come out with these occasional bursts. But that was predicated on these silent agreements. The opponent saying, okay, Mike wants to clinch on the inside and not do much. Okay, I'll agree because I don't want to get him mad. Buster Douglas, according to Teddy Atlas, was the first Mike Tyson opponent who refused to engage in any silent agreements. When Mike Tyson moved to the inside to try and catch a breather and hold, Buster Douglas shoved him off and kept punching. And actually, Tony Tucker's corner told him to do the same. If you go back and watch that Tony Tucker Mike Tyson fight, you can hear in the corner, Tony Tucker's trainer tells him, when you hit him with a combination, push him off. Don't grab him, don't engage in a clinch, push him off and attack him. Because he wants the rest. So don't worry about, oh God, I better tie him up and just have this silent agreement with him on the inside. No. Push him off and attack him. And that's what Buster Douglas did. You see? Alexander Usyk doesn't allow these guys to have any silent agreements and clinch on the inside. He just doesn't allow it. No clinching allowed. For heavyweights, that is very, very physically and psychologically exhausting. Yeah, heavyweights like to be able to have a little rest and a breather. They're accustomed to it. Not just in their fights, even in the gym sparring, it's what the heavyweights are used to. I boxed as a heavyweight, a super heavyweight in the amateurs. So I can tell you from first-hand experience, right? Big guys, we can't fight at the same pace as smaller guys. We learn over the years, how to maneuver and catch a little breath and breathe here and there. And Usyk simply doesn't allow you to do that. Doesn't allow it. And it does you in. It does you right in. So, yeah, I'll go in depth on that in the next film study I do on Patreon, which will be a film study of Usyk Dubois 1. So, yeah, anyway, moving on from Partridge. Well, actually, a couple of extra things about Partridge. He said Joshua versus Fury is a 50-50. I mean, it's laughable. He's saying that because, again, he doesn't want any pressure on himself to fight AJ. So he's trying to diminish AJ down to the level of a Jake Paul. You see what he's doing from a psychological perspective? He's trying to put all this space between himself and AJ. Oh, no, he's on a Jake Paul level. That's a 50-50 between AJ and... Are you having a laugh? Even now, as washed up as AJ is, that's a mismatch in AJ's favor. That's why Jake Paul's talking about, oh, yeah, I'll fight AJ, but not until December 2026. What? And Fury knows it's all nonsense. But again, he doesn't want to be pressured into fighting anybody other than Alexander Usyk. That's all he wants anyone to focus on is the Usyk trilogy fight. Because he doesn't want to risk not being seen. He wants to be not seen as number one in the heavyweight division. But number two is the lowest his ego can handle him being perceived as. If he were to lose to somebody else, he couldn't handle it. That's why he's putting AJ in the same category as Jake Paul, calling it a 50-50. I mean, unbelievable. Jake Paul lost to his brother Tommy. His brother Tommy, could he even win an area level title, an area title at cruiserweight? That's up in the air. And to just back up even more what I'm saying, here we've got Tyson Fury saying he has no regrets over not fighting Anthony Joshua. The fight could be made now. And Tyson Fury's like, nah, we're only interested in coming back for Usyk. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. The only hope, if you do want to see Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua, and personally, I'm not particularly bothered about that fight. I don't really care, because both guys are past their best. But if Tyson Fury is going to get another title shot, I want to see him fight some people first. And perhaps AJ could be somebody that he could fight. Do you know what I mean? That's the only reason I even would propose that fight, is because Tyson Fury needs to actually earn another shot at the title in my eyes. But there you go. Fury acting like he is not interested. The only hope that anybody could have that that fight might take place is the fact that Derek Chisora, who has said some very revealing things over the years, in a recent interview, I think it was earlier on today, Chisora said that Tyson Fury is going to fight AJ. And Chisora says these things with such confidence when he comes out with these little nuggets. I remember when AJ and Fury were negotiating to fight each other when they were both still champions. This was during the global shutdown. And we were getting reassurances early on from Bob Arum that the arbitration between Wilder and Fury was not going to go Fury's way. Bear in mind, Bob Arum's a lawyer. He knows contracts and what have you. He worked as a lawyer at a very high level, I think for the federal government even. But from very early on, Derek Chisora was absolutely adamant. He said it with complete confidence that the fight between AJ and Fury was not going to happen, and that Fury was going to win and that Wilder was going to win the arbitration. Absolute pure confidence. He just laughed anytime anybody mentioned the fight to him between AJ and Fury. He said, come on, man, that's just the promoters talking. The fight's not going to happen. Wilder's got the contract, the arbitration, and so on. And he's done that on multiple occasions in the past where he's leaked information about fights or situations that has proven to be true in the end. Will that be the case this time, though? With Derek Chisora in a recent interview, again, earlier on today, implying that Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury are about to sign to fight. What do you guys think in the chat? East Midlands Fight Fan says, I think Dubois will beat Fury. It's certainly going to get to that stage, you know, if there was a time, how can I put this? There's going to come a time when Father Time catches up to Fury to such an extent that Daniel Dubois absolutely will beat him. Maybe that time has already come. So you could be right. But Tyson Fury has shown no interest in fighting Daniel Dubois. If Dubois beats Usyk, depending on the nature of the win, Fury might be interested. We'll see. Evil Uncle Phil says Dubois will definitely beat Fury. Yon says, who has Duke picked in the Usyk Triple D rematch? He's picked Usyk again. And Duke McKenzie has also said that Dubois would stop Fury. And Duke McKenzie is very good with these predictions, particularly heavyweight predictions, going back decades. He predicted Holyfield to beat Mike Tyson the first time. That's a crazy prediction. I mean, there was only a tiny percentile of people in the world who were picking Holyfield to beat Tyson, and Duke McKenzie was one of them. So he's got form going back a long time, especially with heavyweight fights. And yeah, he said that not only would Dubois beat Fury right now, it'd stop him. Doesn't mean Duke McKenzie can't be wrong, of course, but again, he's got a good track record, so I listen to his predictions. Anyway, let's move on from Partridge for now. Jarrell Miller says AJ turned a fight down with him 4 times in the last month. He also says that Jared Anderson, and it was in this particular interview here, he also said that Jared Anderson and Deontay Wilder have turned fights down with him in the past couple of weeks. Is it true? I'd like to hear from their side, because Jarrell Miller is definitely not an honest person. As far as AJ turning the fight down 4 times, this is why Derek Chisora stuck it on him during this conversation. Because he's like, you're here acting like these fighters don't want to fight you. But AJ signed to fight you back in the days. He gave you a title shot, and you felt like you needed to take roids to beat him. So that was your fault, not his. You're calling him a bitch, but he already signed to fight you back in 2018, 2019. You didn't have enough confidence to attempt to beat him clean. Then the next time you fought a Brit was signed to fight a Brit, it was Daniel Dubois, and you got stopped. And then most recently, you signed to fight Fabio Wardley and you pulled out. And also, he was supposed to fight Derek Chisora, but on that occasion, we do know that Dimitri Salita blocked the fight. Okay? So we'll give Jarrell Miller a pass on that one. But certainly for Fabio Wardley, Jarrell Miller said it was an injury, the reason that he pulled out. I was speculating that perhaps it was the situation with Dimitri Salita that made him pull out, but no, he's saying it was an injury. He said he wanted to be 100%. So he's really in no position to be certainly talking smack about AJ when AJ signed to fight him years ago. And it was Miller that felt like he needed to juice. Certainly he's certainly not in any position to talk smack about him. If AJ has turned the fight down in the past month, AJ could legitimately still be upset about the fact that Miller was juicing. I mean, perhaps AJ will agree to fight Miller only with VADA testing. Or maybe AJ doesn't have the confidence to fight Jarrell Miller right now. It could be a combination of those things. I say that because I was one of the tiny few people, and the videos are still up, who was actually giving Jarrell Miller a good chance against Anthony Joshua back in 2019. I always thought that was a very dangerous fight for him. And basically what I was saying in my videos at the time is that an Anthony Joshua victory against Jarrell Miller is predicated on whether Miller can take his power. And I said, if Miller can take AJ's power, then AJ's going to find himself in deep water against this guy. Because this guy is incredibly physically strong. He walks you down. He forces you to throw more punches than you want to throw. He's not the biggest puncher in the world himself, but he hits hard enough whereby cumulatively he can wear you down. And Anthony Joshua never had the greatest gas tank in the world. So for me, right from day one, that was a dangerous fight for Anthony Joshua. It's probably even more dangerous for him now than it was back then, because AJ has diminished a lot. If Jarrell Miller is diminished, I don't think it's by as much. Okay? So even though I'm saying Miller is in no position to be talking smack here, he isn't. Objectively speaking, I would still favor him to beat AJ in a fight. I wasn't necessarily favoring him back in 2019. I just thought it's dangerous. It all depends on whether Miller can take AJ's power. If I were to retrospectively or retroactively make a prediction, then I would have picked him then. Knowing what we know about AJ now and also Miller now, if that fight had gone ahead in 2019, I think Miller would have won it. And I think Miller would beat AJ right now. Yeah. I think Miller would beat AJ right now. Styles make fights. And this big fat behemoth, Jarrell Miller, gets in there and he just sits on you like some big sumo wrestler. He sits on you like some big sumo wrestler and squeezes all the air out of your lungs and then bludgeons you. Shout out to President Brush for the super chat. He says, has the WBC always been this dodgy? From franchise belt with Canelo to freezing out White to blocking Bivol. Now Fury gets a shot after 2 losses. The short answer is yes. The WBC's always been very, very iffy. Even before Mauricio Sulaiman, when it was his dad, Jose Sulaiman. But in more recent history, you could look at Vitaly Klitschko, for example. Vitaly Klitschko retired from boxing for a couple of years. And when he came out of retirement, he was given a WBC title shot immediately against Sam Peter. I can't definitely say that he was made mandatory for Peter, but I think he was. Just stepped out of a 2-year retirement and bam, he's mandatory for Samuel Peter. Like, how does that happen? So the WBC have been up to those type of shenanigans for a very, very, very long time indeed. All right? I mean, one that I always like to talk about is when they allowed Canelo to fight for his first world title. It was a vacant WBC belt at 154 against Matthew Hatton. Folks, Matthew Hatton had never fought before at 154. He'd never fought at 154. Think about all the contenders that were active in the 154-pound division at that time that would have loved the opportunity to step in there against the very green Canelo to fight for the vacant WBC belt. They didn't get that opportunity. Instead, Matthew Hatton, a guy who had never fought at 154 before in his career, a guy who wasn't even a top contender at 147, his actual division, he was given the opportunity, but I mean, just scandalous by the WBC. Incredible. Yeah, James Toney said the WBC stands for We Be Crooks back in the 90s, and it's a very appropriate name. They've always been up to no good. Shout out to President Brush for the super chat. I wish it were different, but no. WBC always been up to stuff, giving their favorite fighters carte blanche in recent years. Jamal Charlo, right? He was out the ring damn near 2 years and the WBC wouldn't strip him. God damn it all. What's that all about? Damn, I don't remember that. Or maybe I've forgotten about it. But Kyle says, remember the WBC ranking Ali Ramey, who was dead. I think I might have met, that vaguely rings a bell actually. Was that fairly recent, like in the past couple of years? Kyle says, are you a small heavyweight, medium size, or big heavyweight? By today's standards, I'd be a medium size heavyweight. I'd be a medium size heavyweight. I'm in relatively good shape right now, And I weigh just under 250 pounds. But in my prime, I was a lot closer to 230. Right now, I'm about, very high 240s. That's a good point, JM. Yes, the WBC is the Don King of governing bodies. Well, Don King was very close with the WBC. That was the sanctioning body that he was closest with. Don King and Jose Sulaiman were thick as thieves. Oh my gosh. Don King and Sulaiman were like bosom buddies. Very appropriately. Shout out to Joe in the chat. He says, yes, Hatman, been with you since 2016 Facebook days. My guys, big up, Joe. All right, let's move on from Mr. Jarrell Miller to a few bits of other business. So, Matchroom, and they are having some type of press conference tomorrow, are rebranding their business. Now, I know Eddie Hearn's trying to put a brave face on everything. But the reality is, and he's trying to spin the rebrand by saying, we're always the innovators, we're always the best, then everybody else catches up, then we have to innovate again. And there might be some truth to that as far as marketing. But the reason and the timing of this rebrand is because Matchroom have been overtaken by Queensberry. Matchroom have lost control of the heavyweight division. Matchroom have not future-proofed their business in boxing to the extent that many of the other promoters have by signing blue-chip talent coming through, or as much blue-chip talent coming through as some of the other promoters have. Okay? So they know that they need to shake things up in order to get back in the race. And so they've designed a new logo. And if you haven't seen this, go over to the Matchroom Boxing YouTube channel. There's this sketch that Eddie Hearn and Frank Smith have done, which is very David Brent, The Office-esque. It's clearly modeled on that. And it's got Eddie Hearn in the David Brent type role and Frank Smith in some other, supporting type role. And Eddie Hearn's doing his best David Brent impression, basically, talking about the unveiling of the new logo. It's relatively funny. They don't quite pull it off for me, but, decent attempt, I guess, for a couple of guys who aren't really trained actors and whatnot. And it's a good way to try and preempt any criticism of the new logo by kind of making fun of it themselves in this little sketch. Do you see what I'm saying? The new logo, Eddie Hearn says, is modern, and it's fresh, and it's this, that, and the other. Logos have a lot of thought behind them a lot of the time, especially big corporations. A lot of them have got esoteric meanings and whatnot. But from a visual perspective, there are certain logos that you remember. Like the Disney logo, because it's the Mickey Mouse head in the ears. You know that shape? You always remember the shape. And there are various other logos, the Nike swoosh, which I think is supposed to be one of the rings of Saturn. I think that's what the Nike swoosh might be. But if you get the right logo, it can stick in your mind and it can really help a brand. Is the Matchroom logo that kind of logo? It's not the worst logo I've ever seen, but time will tell. The success of a company also charges the logo. The more successful a company becomes, and the more you see that logo associated with the success, the logo becomes more powerful. You understand what I mean? As it stands right now, the logo's like, it's okay. Is it necessary? I don't know. I actually think the old one with just the M and a little red dot was a bit more striking, but Eddie Hearn's probably spent God knows what getting somebody to design a very simple logo. You'd be amazed how much people pay for these things, especially a big company like that. So have a watch of the video, see what you think. One thing that Eddie Hearn has said, which I wonder whether they've got spies or moles in my Element group, or whether they've just come up with this idea independently. Maybe they have, right? They've got lots of people working for them, and I'm sure they brainstorm a lot. Perhaps, and probably it's just a coincidence, but a couple of months back, there were people in my Element group. It wasn't me that came up with this, I don't think anyway. It was a couple of people in my Element group saying that in boxing, the format of press conferences needs to change because it's all very stale now. They need to do something different. They need to do something more interesting than going through the motions of a press conference, asking undercard fighters, what do you think about him? And most of them have got no personality. So he says they're going to refresh and going to have a different format for their press conferences and even weigh-ins maybe moving forward. That's a good move if they get the new formula correct. So in my head, I was thinking, they spend too much time at the press conferences asking the fighters questions. What might be better is for a fighter to come up on stage, like one by one, and like a graphic to come up which gives some basic information about them. And then the fighter is asked about who they are, where they're from, just quick fire questions. And then lastly, what do you think of your opponent, what you're going to do to your opponent. I think Ring have already tried doing this, Ring Magazine, on one of their recent shows. But they were using Mike Coppinger as the interviewer, and he wasn't particularly adept. If they get somebody who's better at interviewing and maybe who's got, good, quick-witted banter, that type of format could work better in press conference scenarios, because some of these like bland undercard fighters you don't need to be spending 5-10 minutes asking him and asking the other guy and asking the promoter and asking the trainer. It's all very boring now. All you need is some rapid fire questions, get them to loosen up a bit by asking, questions about where they're from and what football team they're, all that kind of business. You don't need to just be, what do you think about your opponent? What's he going to do? But he says this about you. That's all dead. You need to spend less time on them boring undercard fighters. And you need an interviewer that has the skill and the discernment to say, okay, we've asked this guy a few rapid fire questions. He hasn't got a personality. Let's wrap it up and get the next guy on stage. Do you know what I mean? That type of thing. Like speed dating or something. To try and equate it to something else. Compare it to something else. So, yeah, we'll see what Matchroom do with this new format for press conferences. Have any of you guys got suggestions in the live chat? Shout out to Rich for the super chat. He says, I still go back and listen to your videos regarding reacting to Wilder's excuse after the second Fury fight. Never heard you laugh so much, mate. Love your vids. Big up Rich. Rich Piana. I'm glad you're still enjoying the old vids. And Deontay Wilder was such a donut, such a yokel, a country bumpkin, a hillbilly from down in Alabama. He just gave me endless fuel. Truth be told, he was such like a stereotypical yokel. So uncouth and country. I always used to imagine him wearing dungarees, wrestling pigs and chasing chickens and stuff like that. So yeah, it always gave me the most amount of jokes. Shout out to Rich. Big up Lawrence King for the super chat. He says, was a massive Fury fan, but went off of him after the White fight. So much messing around, so much BS and problems, changing his mind. You can tell he hasn't cared about his fans for a long time. And that's the thing, Lawrence, which most Fury fans never consider about me. Yes, I criticize the man a lot because he's brought the criticism on himself. I don't just criticize him for the sake of criticizing him because I like him, dislike him for some arbitrary reason. No, there's good reason for me criticizing the man. Here we have a guy who, when he beat Vladimir Klitschko, I was praising to high heaven. Even before them, I was saying, yeah, this guy's serious. The first time I really sat up and took notice of Fury was after the Kevin Johnson performance. I'd watched his fights before then, of course, when he fought John McDermott and whatnot. But it was the Kevin Johnson performance that made me sit up and say, actually, this guy's got something. So I've always given Tyson Fury credit where it was due. Sometimes these Tyson Fury fans will come up to me, well, not come up to me, but, turn up in the comment section of my videos and lives, and they'll say, why won't you give Fury any credit? And my answer is always the same. I'll give Tyson Fury credit again when he gives Usyk credit for beating him twice. How about that? And that just instantly shuts him down. The only thing they can say after that is they start deflecting and talking about Anthony Joshua. It's so weird. Anthony Joshua's got nothing to do with this situation. We're talking about Anthony Joshua for. We're talking about Tyson Fury and Usyk. All right? If you want me to give Fury credit again, start putting pressure on him to give Usyk some credit. I've never seen, other than Deontay Wilder, such a bitter loser. A bad loser is Tyson Fury. He hasn't given the man a single shred of credit. He won't even admit that Usyk's the best guy he's been in the ring with so far. Won't even admit that. Won't even admit that Usyk was any good. Won't even admit that he was impressed with anything that Usyk did. Until he does, you cannot come to me talking about give Tyson credit. No, to hell with that. He needs to give Usyk some credit. Simple. So shout out to Lawrence King. He's one of the Fury fans that has seen the light and understands that you've got to judge these people based upon how they maneuver in the boxing world. As much as we might respect their fighting ability, and I respect Tyson Fury's fighting ability, he's a fine fighter. But outside the ring, come on, man, the guy's moving foul. Shout out to Lawrence for the super chat. Shout out to President Brush. He says, Mr. went wrong releasing Devin Haney and Usyk. I guess he's talking about Eddie Hearn. Yeah, Eddie Hearn has made some blunders over the years. And letting Usyk slip through his hands was definitely one of the biggest blunders. That was one of the biggest blunders of all. Oh my gosh. He literally had one of the greatest heavyweights of all time in his stable, and he let that guy go. Unbelievable. He had someone in his stable who was not only better than AJ, better than Fury as well. And he let the guy slip through his fingers. You do wonder what's going on with Eddie Hearn, because he's done that so many times. But probably the biggest example of doing that was, letting Usyk slip through his fingers. What a blunder. He should have been kissing Usyk's feet. Do you know what I mean? Giving him anything he wanted in his next contract. Moving heaven and earth to make sure he was happy. That's what he should have been doing. I know hindsight is 20/20, but as a boxing promoter, you're supposed to have a bit more wisdom, given all the experience and what have you. Shout out to Lawrence for the super chat. He says, after White is when it got ridiculous. The fake retirements, the BS, the call-outs, then fight is off. 24 hours to sign. Just too much messing. I completely agree. I mean, for me, it was before then. There we have Luke Partridge in the chat. For me, it was before then. It was the whole lineal era. You know all that? I'm lineal champion. I'm like, he was acting as though Anthony Joshua with his 3 belts was irrelevant because I've got this invisible, mythical lineal championship, which is the only thing that matters. And so when I fight Deontay Wilder, That's the heavyweight title. That's the heavyweight championship of the world. That guy with 3 belts, oh yeah, you can forget about him. Neither me nor Wilder needs to fight that guy. When he started doing all that, I was like, no. This is propaganda of the most egregious type. This is deceptive practice. That's what Tyson Fury was doing with all that. And then, of course, with that whole lineal nonsense, he went on to fight Otto Wallin. First it was, Tom Schwartz, and then Otto Wallin. And at that time, Dillian Whyte was calling him out. That's when Dillian Whyte was at his peak. That's when Dillian Whyte was better than he was when Fury eventually fought him a couple years later. When Dillian Whyte was at the peak of his powers, he called out Fury, and Fury said, yeah, I'll fight Dillian Whyte as long as they put the WBC Diamond Belt on the line. The WBC quickly came out and said, okay, we'll do that. And at that point, Tyson Fury went silent, and then he's fighting Tom Schwartz. I mean, come on. When he was doing stuff, I was like, nah, man, this guy is a joker. This guy's a joker. Selling us a Tom Schwartz fight rather than fighting Dillian Whyte. Like, nah. A shout out to Lawrence King again. He says, Deontay Wilder throwing Breland out and tarnishing his name was a major fumble for him. The only guy in camp who knew what he was doing and ruining a legend like Breland because you lost is disgusting. Yeah. The thing about Deontay Wilder, right? When you combine extremely low intelligence with extremely large ego, that is when you get bizarre behavior like we saw from Deontay Wilder. Somebody with very low intelligence, but an enormous ego and very high testosterone at that time. Yeah, you're going to get bizarre stuff coming out of his mouth. Strange thoughts, even stranger behavior. Turning on the very people who actually had his back and were doing what was best for him, and instead keeping the yes men around him. Again, this is indicative of, like I say, Wilder's massive ego, but very low intelligence. Yeah. Incredible that he accused Breland of being in on a plot to poison his drinking water in the corner, to weaken him so that Fury could beat him. Unreal. Unreal. And his brother at the time, they were literally like Dumb and Dumber. Marcellus Wilder and Deontay, both unbelievably dumb people. And his brother was whispering in his ear more nonsense, egging him on like his little hype man. Deontay Wilder was like the black version of Biff from Back to the Future. Any of you guys seen Back to the Future? Yeah, that's what Deontay Wilder was like. It was like Biff from Back to the Future. For those of you who don't know Back to the Future, it was a feel-good sci-fi trilogy starring Michael J. Fox. The original came out in the 1980s. And Biff was this like idiotic bully and the main antagonist in the 3 films. And he was so dumb that when he was hanging around with his dumb friends and he was bullying somebody, he would tell them to make like a tree and get out of here. Of course, it's supposed to be make like a tree and leave. But Biff didn't get the joke, right? So, yeah, Deontay Wilder's like black American version of Biff or something. He's unbelievably dumb. People whisper a few things in his ear and then he's, you know, going off, steam coming out of his ears. I mean, he would have been a manipulator's dream. Al Heyman and Shelley Finkel had an absolute field day with Deontay Wilder. They will have come across very few fighters in their careers who were as easy to manipulate as Wilder was. Shout out to Rich for the super chat. He says, which excuse was the worst? Breland being a double agent, heavy suit, or egg weight in the gloves? I'm laughing out loud typing this out. Which was the worst excuse? They're all ridiculous. But I'm going to say the egg weight in the gloves. Because that's the least plausible. You know? None of them are plausible. All right, just to be clear to anybody who hasn't heard me talk about this stuff before. They're all ridiculous. But the most ridiculous of all is the idea that Tyson Fury had egg weights in his gloves. That's like psychedelic. Because Wilder would have had people supervising Tyson Fury get his wraps up, you know, his hands wrapped and get gloved up. And then that's got to be signed off by a member of the commission. So at which point do they get to put the egg weight in? Is it after the gloves have been taped up and signed off? In which case you're trying to slide an egg weight down the wrist of a glove. The wrist of a glove is extremely tight. Even if you somehow manage to get the egg weight in, that egg weight is now going to be rattling around in the glove. You're going to end up damaging your hand when you hit somebody with an egg weight. You're going to literally smash your hand to bits. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. It's scary that people believe that. Literally scary. And shout out to Rich. Shout out to Lawrence King. He says, and calling out Usyk and Joyce has seen them as a legitimate, or seen then as a legitimate candidate, and then opting for Chisora 3 was a joke, absolute joke, lost respect. Yep. Another thing that, see, I even forget, Fury has done so much nonsense over the years. I've literally forgotten about half of the stuff he's done. So thank you for reminding me. The guy's kept up with so much effery that I forget half of it. I only remember the highlights, you know. But yeah, then choosing Chisora 3. Unbelievable. And doing it on pay-per-view, lest we forget. Another one from Lawrence, he says, and Scott and Wilder were doing spins like it was Michael Jackson. And, you know, when Deontay Wilder got knocked out by Zheli Zhang, he gets hit with a right hook and then he spins round. He's smiling. And then Zhang jumps on him and deposits him on the canvas with another big shot. People then started playing footage of Wilder in the gym. I think it was with Malik Scott, throwing a 1-2, then spinning round. Some people are acting like it's a coincidence that Deontay Wilder span round and smiled and all that kind of business. Look, I'm not saying that after he got hit by the right hook, he deliberately span round. But what I'm saying is, at the very least, I think when he got hit by that right hook from Zhang, he thought he was back in the gym for a split second, doing that spin around routine with Malik Scott. That's how out of it he was when he got hit with a shot. Because he smiled, which is just what he was doing when he was in the gym with Malik, doing the silly spin around thing. Now, yes, it's funny to laugh at and whatnot. There may be a method to that madness, because that's something which actually Adam Booth used to have George Groves doing. I'm not sure whether David Hay was doing it as well, but the reason that he would have them spin round and have them doing roly-polies and stuff like that in the ring is because he wanted his fighters to be able to fight dizzy. He didn't want the feeling of being dizzy to shock them in a fight. Do you know what I mean? So that was the method behind why Adam Booth had George Groves and whatnot doing it. So, you know, it kind of makes sense. But it'd probably be more effective if you just spin him round for a while and then just start doing pads. So yeah, anyway, it is very funny with Deontay Wilder, the way that Zheli Zhang fight went down. Another one from Lawrence, he says, remember Wilder's brother posting on socials that Wilder's autopsy had revealed an egg weight dent. Yeah, incredible. As I was saying, Dumb and Dumber, Deontay and Marcellus Wilder. An autopsy, I mean... Did these guys even go to school? Unbelievable. And call it an autopsy. But Deontay Wilder almost did get bodied in that fight, so, you know, symbolically, could have called it an autopsy. He got bodied by Fury in that second fight. And the third fight, Fury bodied him. But as far as the dent in his head, well, what did Frazer Clarke have in his head? Because, again, the Wilder fans win. There's no way that he could have a dent in his head like that unless you had an egg weight in your glove. Oh, did Fabio Wardley have an egg weight in his glove when he hit Frazer Clarke? Anyway. Another one from Lawrence. He says, yeah, Fury legit knocked out White, then went over to Usyk, called him out, then called out Joyce, then went and retired, then fought Chisora for a third time. That point is where I started going off him. Yeah, typical Fury shenanigans. That's the frustrating thing about Tyson Fury. He is a fantastic fighter. If Fury was a rubbish fighter, you wouldn't care, or I wouldn't care so much about all the nonsense. But because he's actually really good, there's a tendency for a lot of people to believe his BS. Do you know what I mean? And that's what frustrates you, is when there's a significant number of people who actually fall for his lies and can't see through his deceptive practices. Yeah, because he is good, you know? If he was like some bum that was saying all this stuff, you know, if he was a Chris Lovejoy and he's making all these silly claims and ducking fight, you wouldn't even care. It's just noise. But because he's actually good, there's a greater tendency for people to fall for his BS. That's the thing. Shout out to Lawrence King. FIFA says, Hatman, do you miss David Price? Well, do I miss David Price? I'm thinking of a way to answer that question without sounding sadistic. Somebody in the chat needs to help me out with that question. About whether I miss David Price. I'm struggling with that one. How do I answer that one? How do I answer that without sounding sadistic? Shout out to Lawrence again. He says, the thing is, Fury went to Germany and beat Klitschko and also fought Wilder when nobody wanted to, and it made a lot of people, me included, buy into him. Well, nobody wanted to go to Germany, but you had to go to Germany to get a title shot, so everybody was doing it. David Haye did it. Pulev did it. Well, Pulev was based in Germany too. Derek Chisora fought Vitaly in Germany. So everybody was going to Germany. In fact, I think that was something that was a little oversold about Tyson Fury. He went to Germany and beat Klitschko. Yeah, everyone else went to Germany to fight Klitschko just about. Because you had to. There was no other way you were getting a title shot. And as far as fighting Deontay Wilder, well, Wilder received multiple offers to fight AJ, which he turned down. Especially the DAZN offer of over $100 million. I mean, DAZN sit him down in their offices with their executives, with Wilder there, his team there, and say, look, we're going to pay you over $100 million and you get at least one fight of Anthony Joshua, possibly two. And you see that mandatory that you got against Dominic Breazeale? Yeah, throw that in there as well. We'll pay you over $100 million. And Deontay Wilder turned it down. You know what I mean? Fury sold it like nobody else was willing to fight Wilder, but it's simply not true. There was loads of fighters willing to fight Wilder. Dylan White wanted to fight Wilder. He was willing to fight him in America. Joseph Parker wanted to fight him. Klitschko wanted to fight him. AJ offered him, multiple times. Made him multiple offers, and Deontay Wilder didn't do it. So there was a narrative created around Fury, which, a lot of people bought into, but the narrative was built on sand, and the tide was coming in, Shout out to Lawrence King. I was hoping we could move past the David Price thing without me looking like some kind of sadist by answering the question, because David Price was very fun to watch. He was very fun. And he comes across as such a decent guy. You do feel like bad when you enjoy his fights and he's getting knocked about and stuff like that. But there was just something comical about it. There was just something comical about it. Yeah, that's right. Price KO'd AJ in sparring. And I remember when I first mentioned that, whenever you talk about sparring rumors, the fans of whichever fighter gets knocked out, supposedly got knocked out in sparring, never consider that the rumor could be true, ever. They say because it's a rumor, it's definitely not true. I heard about AJ getting knocked out by Price in sparring long before Price ever talked about it. I was told by somebody on Facebook, that there was a tape going round from the gym of AJ getting knocked out by David Price in sparring. And the guy described to me exactly the punch that was thrown and all this type of business. And so I then went to my YouTube channel and just relayed what I was told by somebody that was definitely a boxing insider. This guy was a boxing guy, 100%. Even on his Facebook page, you see him in all these different pro gyms and all that type of business. Yeah. And he DM'd me and he told me all this stuff about AJ getting KO'd in sparring by Price. I was confident that the guy was telling me the truth. Obviously, I didn't know because I hadn't seen the video for myself, but based upon the conversation I had with the guy, I was confident. But anyway, I presented it to my subscribers. I said, look, I've been told that AJ was knocked out by David Price, and the AJ fans were furious with me. How could you spread rumors, this and that, blah, blah. I'm like, look, I'm not telling you it's true. I can't tell you it's true because I haven't seen it for myself. But there's nothing wrong with talking about heard on the grapevine stuff as long as I present it as such. I'm not presenting it as facts, but this is how fans of any fighter tend to be. If there's a story about them getting mashed up in sparring, they're instantly going to disbelieve it. They're not even going to consider that it might be true. But it turns out it was true. AJ did get KO'd by David Price in sparring years ago. And actually, I can't remember who said it, but it was somebody that was present when AJ got knocked out by Price. And they said that his KO to Price in sparring was almost identical in terms of the way he fell to what happened to him against Dubois. Yeah? They said when AJ went down against Price in sparring, it was almost identical to the way he went down against Dubois, like on his face first. And he had to be like dragged out of the ring. Heavyweight boxing is no joke. Yon says sparring is different. Your mindset isn't the same as a real fight. In some instances, that's true. In many instances, you might have sparred 9 rounds and you've got 4 sparring partners per session. So you come out for round 10 and it's a guy who's coming in fresh. You've just done 9 rounds. He's just, so in a scenario like that, when you've done 9 odd rounds of a spar with 3 other guys and the next guy comes in fresh, anything could happen. He might not be anywhere near as good as you, but he could drop you, he could hurt you, he could knock you out. So sparring is sparring, but there are some instances where stuff that happens in sparring actually is significant. Not always. You have to factor all these things, obviously. You have to factor in all these things, obviously. You have to take these things into account. But as East Midlands fight fan said there, it happens a lot. A lot of stuff goes on. I mean, there was a rumor back in the days that Vitaly Klitschko got knocked out by Freza Kendo in sparring. Again, some people say there's no way. Klitschko had an iron jaw. Kendo wasn't a big puncher. Trust me, folks, stuff happens. As a professional fighter, and even with your amateur career included, you get hit a lot more in sparring than you ever will in contests. And it's the law of averages. Somebody can just catch you one day after thousands and thousands of rounds of sparring over the years, catch you in a sweet spot with the best punch they've ever thrown in their lives, and you find yourself on the canvas. It happens, especially in heavyweights. If there wasn't video footage of Mike Tyson getting dropped by Greg Page, nobody ever would have believed it. Because Greg Page was not a big puncher. Nobody would have believed that he dropped Mike Tyson in sparring, but he did. Right? There is video footage of it. Blues says, Bicoli KO'd Ali, Tyson, and John L. Sullivan in sparring. Ingram says, AJ has had a great career, done wonders for the UK boxing scene, and in my opinion, has a better resume than Luke Partridge. But call it a day, brother. Yeah, that's one thing nobody can deny about Anthony Joshua, and that is that he's done wonderful things for the popularity of boxing, not just in the United States, but worldwide. Yes. Now, Tyson Fury opened the doors for AJ's success. That's true. But Tyson Fury, for whatever reason, wasn't the star back then that AJ was. So, even though Tyson Fury beat Klitschko, he just wasn't resonating with the fans. He didn't have the right machine behind him. He didn't have the right image. He wasn't putting on the right kind of performances at that time. AJ was. He had the right team. He had the right image. He resonated with the fans. He was putting on the right type of performances. As in exciting performances. Even if he was getting hurt. People want to see drama in heavyweight fights. AJ was delivering. He had Eddie Hearn behind him, a prime Eddie Hearn. The formula just worked. And together they massively revived the British boxing scene. Obviously, you know, the Carl Froch and George Groves rivalry, that was the platform that preceded all of that. But still, AJ played a massive part in reviving not just British boxing, but world boxing with the rivalries that he was having and what have you. So, yeah, 100%. Shout out to Rich for the super chat. He says, Do you think the Fury that beat Vlad could beat Usyk? Do I think the Fury that beat Vlad could beat Usyk? No. At least not the Usyk that fought AJ. Because I've had that question before where people say, do you think, you know, the Fury that fought, let's say, Wilder the second time could have beaten Usyk? I might have in the past said maybe the Fury that beat Wilder could have beaten Usyk, but you have to understand that I don't think Usyk, the version of Usyk that fought Fury either time, is as good as the Usyk who fought AJ the first time. I think that's the best version of Usyk that I've seen, certainly at heavyweight, was in the first AJ fight. And so the way I would answer the question would be to say that prime for prime, I think Usyk wins. But if you take a 37-year-old Usyk against a 29-year-old Fury, or however old he was during the second Wilder fight, no, he might have been early 30s. But anyway, if you take a prime Fury against a 37, 38-year-old Usyk, maybe Fury. But both guys in their prime, I'm taking Usyk. So shout out to Rich. Shout out to Lawrence. He says, who have you got for Usyk Dubois? I think it will be a more difficult fight for Usyk this time around. Like other people, I think he'll show wear and tear. But I'm still going to lean towards Usyk winning the fight. Yeah, I'm still going to lean towards Usyk winning. I don't think Dubois... Dubois is still kind of rigid. He's got this rigidness about his biomechanics. And I think he struggles with the southpaw angles. So I think he'll give it a better go. And particularly in the early rounds, I think he'll give Usyk a lot to think about, and Usyk may have some problems. But ultimately, I think he's still going to get the job done in the end. So I'm saying Usyk. But I think Dubois is going to have more fire in his belly this time, and he'll be more stubborn in there than he was first time. And what about you though, Lawrence? Who have you got in the Usyk Dubois fight? Shout out to Lawrence again. He says, yeah, people forget how down bad UK boxing scene was in 2009 to 2014. It was just not much there. Shout out to my girl, Kelly Maloney. Definitely not my girl. Yeah, that was really the dark ages of certainly heavyweight boxing, but the UK boxing scene as a whole. Yeah. David Haye was doing his thing, but David Haye at heavyweight was doing a lot of con artistry. Let's be real. A lot of con artistry from David Haye. Even though I do miss David Haye, but I miss him more. Pause, by the way, not like that. I miss David Haye more when he was not a heavyweight belt holder. So before he became WBA champion and also after, I liked David Haye's career. It was fun. Trash talk, all that type of business. A fun character. But yeah, David Haye was messing about. And the UK domestic scene was pretty dire. Pretty dire. I mean, there were some good domestic fights, but in terms of like world level and certainly in terms of public interest, it was pretty low back then. Remember, Eddie Hearn came on the scene doing prize fighter, basically small hall shows. That's how Eddie Hearn came on the scene. Well, obviously before that he represented Audley Harrison against David Haye, but subsequently, well, no, even before then he was doing prize fight with Audley. That's how Audley ended up getting the opportunity, I think, against Haye, wasn't it? From the prize, or was it the other way around? It's so long ago now. Yeah, I think it was the other way around. I think it was Audley Harrison. Yeah, Audley Harrison had an opportunity against Haye first, and then Eddie Hearn signed with Sky and started doing prize fighter and all that type of business. Yeah. That was the first time I'd ever seen Eddie Hearn. It was in the run-up to that Haye Audley Harrison fight, as far as I can remember. It was the first time I'd seen him. And he looked so weird to me because he looked kind of like his dad, but also different. And his hair was like, almost like a bouffant then or something. His hair weren't the one. He had a weird trim or lack thereof. And yeah, he just looked weird to me. I was so familiar with his dad's face, and he kind of looked like his dad, but not quite. He didn't quite have his image together at that point. East Midlands Fight Fan says, yes, who knocked out Lennox Lewis in sparring, Hatman? Supposedly it was a guy called Garing Lane. Garing Lane was a big, fat, black American journeyman. I say big, he was fat. He's only about 5'10". He actually fought, I want to say on the undercard of Lewis McCall. The first Lewis McCall fight. I want to say he fought on the undercard and got a win, I think. Or did he lose? I don't know, but I think he fought on the undercard. You can check on BoxRec. But yeah, Gary Lane was like this fat black American guy, bald, and he was Lennox Lewis's sparring partner. And yeah, I think it was in the run-up to the McCall fight. That's where the commentators were saying that the rumor was that Lewis had been flattened by Gary Lane in sparring. Shout out to Lawrence. He says, I got Dubois winning. I think he won't let the moment get to him this time. I do believe the infamous body shot wasn't a low blow either. I think Dubois' team needs to be on complaining to body. Okay, so you're going for Daniel Dubois? When you've got a young guy like that and an aging fighter who has achieved everything and he's basically just going over old ground now, you can see how the young fighter will win. You can see how he'll win. But I do think that Team Dubois are approaching this fight the wrong way by trying to antagonize Usyk. I think that's the wrong way to approach this fight. Because other than Father Time, the biggest issue that Usyk's going to have now is lack of motivation. It doesn't matter how dedicated he's been over the years. When you've climbed to the heights that he's climbed to in the past, beating AJ twice, beating Fury twice, beating Dubois the first time, undisputed cruiserweight, Olympic gold medalist. When you've literally conquered the whole sport, he's just a human being at the end of the day. He's not going to be able to be as motivated for every fight, especially when he's running it back with people he's already beaten. Do you know what I mean? So, for me, the worst thing you could do if you're Team Dubois is get Usyk mad, is get under his skin. That's the worst thing you can do, because now you're giving him motivation that he might not have already had, or a level of motivation that he might not have already had going into this rematch at this stage of his career, after all he's done, after all the money he's made, after everything he's achieved, you know? So that's one of the reasons I'm still leaning towards Usyk winning, is I just think the approach from Team Dubois is the wrong approach. Usyk is the kind of guy who you really need to try and lull into a full sense of security. You have to understand the personality type. Usyk is used to being the small guy. Those fighters who are used to being the small guy, they almost have a chip on their shoulder when they're going in against bigger, stronger guys. Do you know what I mean? That's what motivates them. That's what gets their juices flowing. When they feel threatened, when they feel like there's a challenge that they're not supposed to overcome, when they feel like people are doubting them. That's when a guy like Usyk is at his most dangerous. Where you can catch Usyk off guard is by playing the nice guy, unassuming, making him feel comfortable, lulling him into the full sense of security, and then ding ding round one, you come charging at him like a madman. That would be the psychological tactic I would use. That would be the approach that I would use. Do the Andy Ruiz thing before the first AJ fight. Oh, Mr. Nice Guy, shake his hand. Oh, please, can I hold your belt? You know, all this type of business. Extra, extra nice. Rock him to sleep with all that. And then from the opening bell, you come out like a madman, no respect. Even in the clinches, you're roughing him up, shoving him off, being as dirty as you can get away with, within reason. Nothing egregious, right? I think that's the way you beat Alexander Usyk. You don't give him reason to train hard as soon as the fight gets signed, which is what Team Dubois have done, with Don Charles coming out of all the stuff he came out with, his son getting involved. You know what I mean? It's like you're playing into Usyk's hands with all that stuff. You don't want to give him a reason to be more motivated. That's my take on it. But look, Dubois definitely has a chance. I'll say that. He's definitely got a chance. And I give him a better chance this time than I think he had last time. So shout out to Lawrence. There you go, Ocean Blue. Just shake his hand and say, see you in the ring. He needs to take a leaf out of Andy Ruiz's book. Shake his hand. Oh, nice to meet you. All super respectful. It's a ruse. You can even go as far as losing the face-offs, because Alexander Usyk he doesn't have like a Mike Tyson image as a destroyer and an intimidator. But when have you ever seen Alexander Usyk lose a face-off? When have you ever seen him lose a stare down? Alexander Usyk makes a point in every fight I can remember seeing where he's had a stare down. He always wants to be the guy that looks away last. Always. So he obviously means something to Usyk. Do you know what I mean? He obviously buys into all that stuff. And therefore, if you, as an opponent, are facing off with Usyk and he's staring at you and you look away after 5 seconds, he's going to relax mentally. He's going to be like, this guy's not on it. You know what I mean? He's not on it. I broke him within a few seconds of the stare down. You know? See, that's the approach I would try and take. Rock him to sleep. Because Usyk, even though he does all this clowning and joking and all this type of business, Usyk is actually very alpha. He's very alpha. And you notice it more when you see the way that Usyk interacts with his team. Have you ever seen Usyk interact with his team? He's always like ordering them around. He'll tell members of his team, you guys, shut up. I'm talking. Go do this. Go. Yeah, he's properly the boss around his team. He's like some type of CEO, you know, the way he orders his team around. I'm sure he takes care of them and all that, but he talks to them in a very direct, borderline rude way. Yeah? Usyk is actually very alpha. All that clowning and juggling and all that type of stuff, yeah, it's all very funny and whatnot, but he's actually a very alpha character. That's why he doesn't like to lose stare downs. Do you know what I mean? He's got that chip on his shoulder because he's a smaller man. He's a smaller heavyweight. He always feels like he needs to prove himself to these bigger guys. And shout out to Lawrence, he says, I will give Usyk mad respect though. Came up from cruiser and did all that. Now is fighting a horrible fight with a guy 10 years younger. Fury would have never. I agree. Lawrence also says Usyk is also very good at adapting in face-offs. That's one of the things that frustrated Tyson Fury so much, is that Usyk wouldn't look away. If you notice in the run-up to the second fight, Usyk didn't even bother. Trying to outstare. Fury didn't bother, excuse me. Fury didn't even bother trying to win the face-offs with Usyk second time around. He's like, okay, this is just a waste of time. Because Usyk will not be denied. Tosserman says Usyk is clearly competitive, but quiet about it. That's a great way to describe it. Yeah, he's quietly competitive, but he is extremely competitive on the quiet. Do you know what I mean? Like super competitive, super duper competitive. Blue says Usyk can fight through the weight of a nation at war. Nation at war's hopes on his shoulders, excuse me, will never beat him mentally. Fee Khabib says Dubois won't get the credit when he knocks Usyk out. He's old, unmotivated, etc. Fanboys will be in hell. But the problem is Usyk is old. This is the problem. We're not dealing with a prime Usyk. We're dealing with an Usyk that, yes, was good enough to beat Fury twice, who's also not in his prime. So if people take away some credit for Dubois, some of that is legit. You can't say that Dubois is fighting a prime Usyk, in my opinion anyway. This is not, and this is not me saying it only now. No. Before the first Fury fight, I was saying Usyk's not in his prime anymore. So, yeah, if Dubois wins, credit for beating the #1 heavyweight in the world right now, but he hasn't beaten a prime Usyk. He's beaten an Usyk coming off good wins against another fighter who also wasn't in his prime. Like, we do have to take, like, what I'm laying out here isn't unreasonable. Do you know what I mean? It's the facts of the matter, the way I see it at least. What we can say, if Dubois wins, is that he's the man. Whether Usyk's past his best or not, if Dubois beats him, he's the man. He'll be undisputed And anyone who wants to prove themselves as the best is going to have to go see Mr. Dubois. Shout out to Lawrence. He says, Hearn also said that Usyk versus Joshua won. Usyk was using a trick where he would use his fingers to indicate to face the fans to Joshua so that he would be the last staring. And I think AJ tried to use that in the run-up to the second fight, if I remember correctly. Had to use Usyk's trick again. Or was it in the first? Actually, because I swear AJ did that in a stare down for one of the fights, but it didn't work. He indicated to Usyk to look away, but AJ ended up looking away anyway. I think it might have been in the run-up to the rematch. I forget now. Yeah, I think it was the run-up to the rematch. Shout out to Lawrence. He says, I was shocked how awful Fury looked in the Usyk 2, both physically and speed and boxing-wise. God knows what he was eating in Malta to look like that. Yeah, a lot of it is genetics, obviously, but when you don't have great genetics, you do need to be more careful and you do need to be more disciplined about your conditioning. The second fight was very different, wasn't it, to the first fight? Fury boxed in a more conventional way. It wasn't as flashy. Fury boxed in a way in the second fight which was designed to try and preserve energy, because he wasted a lot of energy in the first fight. And I think that's what he was mindful of in the second fight. There may have been some notion in his mind that he lost too much weight first time around, and that may have contributed to why he gassed out. But the truth of the matter is he gassed out because Usyk was forcing him to think, move, and work at a rate that he's not accustomed to. That's just what Usyk does to you. But maybe in Fury's mind, he thought, let me not concentrate so much on losing weight and let me box in a more energy efficient fashion, because I don't want to gas out at the end of the fight like last time and get pinned on the ropes and pinged about. Ayed says, how can Fury think he won by 5 rounds? Yeah, that's what he said in one of the interviews earlier on today, that he won by, I mean, are you having a laugh? Won by 5 rounds. And I think he said that of the second fight, right? He won by, I'm like, what? How bizarre. Yeah, that's right, Ayed. Fury fought like someone who didn't want to get hurt. You know, the second fight, even though it wasn't as eventful as the first fight, it followed a very similar pattern. You know, the pattern was the same. Fury had some success early on, although Usyk won the first round in the first fight. First 3 rounds, I want to say he won. Then he won kind of the middle portion. And it was similar the second time around. Fury had some success in the first half of the fight, let me just say that, against Usyk in the rematch. But second half of the fight, he started fading again. And that's when Usyk started landing the big shots and Fury got wobbled, and not wobbled as bad as he did in the 9th when they met in June of 2024. But he did get stunned in the back end of the rematch with Usyk, noticeably. And he started getting clobbered, you know, big right hooks and left hands over the top and all that. So it wasn't as eventful, it wasn't as intense, but it basically followed the same pattern or a similar pattern. And Usyk does what Usyk does. He always closes fights out strong. He has a gear that these heavyweights just can't go to down the stretch. He's like a car that's got 6 gears rather than 4 or 5, you know? Most of these heavyweights have got 4 or 5 gears. Usyk's got 6 and 7. And so you might be able to stay with him up to a certain point, but then you go into the final third of the fight and he kicks it into 7th gear. And they just can't stay with him at that point. They cannot stay with him. Shout out to Shush. He says, Spencer said Fury will tune up against Miller. Yeah, I'd be surprised to see that. Where did Spencer say this? And which Spencer are you talking about? Spencer Fearon or Spencer Oliver? Or Spencer Brown? There are so many Spencers. Shout out to James Clifford. Good to see you, my bro. He says, is it me or is Dubois' corner very emotional, loud, and hyper? The polar opposite of Team Usyk? Whereas Usyk and his team are just stoic, cold, and calculating. Usyk is playing chess and Dubois checkers. I 100% agree with you. Don Charles is one of the most overly emotional, silly people in boxing. And as they say, the apple don't fall too far from the tree. Because his son seems to be similar. Coming out of all this nonsense about, gouge Usyk's eyes out. And I mean, come on, man. Usyk offered him a street fight since he was talking tough. He said, pick your best 3 guys, I'll come with my best 3 guys after the Dubois fight. Right? So it weren't no hype talk. He's saying, after the Dubois fight, let's meet up and we'll have a showdown. And rather than saying yes, which is all George Fox, Don Charles' son, had to say if he was serious, instead, he tried to intimidate his way out of the fight. Oh, I'll gouge your eyes. You don't want to fight me. Stick to boxing. I'll gouge your eyes out. Like, oh my God. So yeah, Dubois' team, embarrassing. With the way they're carrying on, embarrassing. Usyk, very businesslike, as you say, cold, calculating. But here's the thing. In my opinion, in my estimation, unprofessional opinion and estimation, Daniel Dubois on the spectrum. And I don't think he's going to get so caught up in the stuff that Don Charles and George Fox are doing. I want to say that he's more detached from his training team than Usyk is. I think Usyk's really close to his team, I think there's like a real bond between him and his inner circle. But with Dubois, the impression I get is the only person he has a bond with is his dad. Don Charles and all the other people in his team, I don't think he pays them that much mind, to be honest. I'm sure he listens to some extent and goes through the motions, but ultimately, I don't think he has an emotional bond. I could be wrong. This is just my perception. I don't think he has an emotional bond with George Fox or Don Charles. And therefore, their silly emotional behavior, I don't really think will negatively impact Dubois himself. The concern I would have is that it would give Usyk motivation. That's the only concern I would have. I don't think Dubois is going to get sucked into a silly mindset because Don Charles and George Fox have a silly mindset. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, shout out to James Clifford for the super chat. Big up every time, my bro. Shout out to Shush. He says, okay, with Spencer Brown on Boxing King Media. I'll check it out. Will Tyson Fury come back against Jerome? And you know what? Tyson Fury has sparred Jerome Miller. Jerome Miller was in his camp. So, on second thoughts, Fury might do it. He might do it against me. He might. Because he has sparred the guy, and maybe he saw something in the sparring where he was like, I can handle this dude. And Miller's also not a puncher. Miller's not a puncher. He's a plodder. I don't know. Fury might do it, but it's a fight in which Fury wouldn't look particularly good, I would imagine. I mean, it's going to go the distance. Fury's going to move around and mess about and try and walk Miller onto uppercuts. Fury probably still beat Miller now on points. But he might look sloppy. Do you know what I mean, in the fight? And does he want to look sloppy? And look, if he does fight Miller, that is far more acceptable than him just coming back and getting an immediate title shot against whoever, whether it's Usyk or Dubois. At least it's a name. So, oh dear. Shush said, he said Miller or 400-year-old. Oh, God. So, let's hope he's not playing the Bob Arum game. Was it Bob Arum? Eddie Hearn? I'm sure many promoters play this game, whereby they're looking to line their fighter up against the soft opponent, but they throw some legitimate names out there as well to make it look as though they want a tough fight. Do you know what I mean? But the weakest of the opponents who they initially mentioned was the guy who they were always going to fight to begin with. Maybe that's what that is. Maybe Tyson Fury's targeting 400-year-old Pulev. I certainly hope not. Last I checked, Pulev was going to fight Michael Hunter in defense of his regular WBA belt. Choice says, I see Peter Fury walking around Victoria Station yesterday evening with his wife looking lost. Ocean Blue talking about Turkey, mentioning Partridge. Yeah, we spoke about that earlier on in the stream. And get the graphic up on screen here. But all Turkey said is that he spoke to Fury and he has Fury's word that he'll fight on a Riyadh season show in 2026. Fury's word is worth nothing. Do you know what I mean? As I said earlier on, it's not even worth half a penny. Not even worth half a penny. Bear in mind, Tyson Fury and his dad have seemed to insinuate that Turkey had something to do with rigging the scorecards against him in both Usyk fights. If Fury genuinely believes that nonsense, if he's convinced himself to believe such rubbish, then he might just be saying, well, let me give Turkey a taste of his own medicine. Let me act as though, yeah, I'm going to fight on a Riyadh season card, and then when he sends the contract, I'll just go silent or long him off. So, yeah, that's all Turkey has said, is that he's got Fury's word, and Fury's word is worth nothing at all. East Midlands Fight Fan says, sick of hearing about Fury now, and me too. But I feel compelled whenever Fury pipes up and starts pushing his propaganda. I feel compelled to push back against what he's saying and not allow him to get any kind of momentum with his lies. So I don't tend to talk about him these days unless he's piped up and said something. Who do I think will win Crawford Canelo? I think Canelo will win on points. Whether or not he deserves the victory, we will wait and see. But I just feel with the style matchup and the politics being on Canelo's side, as they almost always are, I have to go with Canelo. I agree with FIFA. Yeah, he said, the sad thing is Fury has nothing to be ashamed of. He is so brave in the ring and such a brilliant fighter. Unfortunately, he is a compulsive liar. Well, this is the thing with Fury, right? Fury is a brilliant fighter, but he's not as brilliant as he wants people to think he is. So he's got kind of a chip on his shoulder. He knows he's not as good as he wants to make people believe he is. And that's the reason for all the lying and gaslighting and all this type of business. He literally wants to be seen as a heavyweight Mayweather. That's how he wants to be seen. AJ says, are the politics really on Canelo's side, Hatman, with him being so close to the end and Turkey calling the shots? Well, Crawford's the older fighter. And the politics tends to be on the side of whichever fighter is the bigger commercial draw. And there's just no comparison between Canelo and Crawford in terms of who's the bigger draw. Canelo's just light years ahead of Crawford in terms of pulling power, you know? So I have to imagine that the politics will be on Canelo's side. Because again, Crawford is older than Canelo is. And Crawford, up until this fight got signed, wasn't trying to fight anybody else, which may indicate that he's very close to retiring himself. Do you know what I mean? JM says, if Crawford hasn't aged overnight, I have him effing Canelo up. He'll want to, but he's never been in there with someone that can punch like Canelo. And in order for Crawford to win, he's going to have to hold his feet long enough for Canelo to actually be able to punch back. Because I think Crawford's going to have to hit Canelo with eye-catching shots to win. And if you're on the move all the time, it's very difficult to catch Canelo with eye-catching shots. He sees shots coming at long range. If you're going to catch him, you need to be in his face, at least for a second or two. Plant your feet and get some shots off in his face. And when you do that, you're right there for counters. Can Crawford take those counters? You know what I mean? Can he take those counters? We'll see. JM says, Canelo has to plant his feet and Crawford is an elite mover. Yes, but I don't think Crawford can get a decision moving excessively. I don't think so. I mean, Turkey's already laid the table by saying, I don't support Mickey Mouse fights. Not Mickey Mouse, Tom and Jerry fights, right? I don't support Tom and Jerry fights anymore. So he's kind of set the tone early of what kind of fight he wants. And I just don't think they'll give Crawford a decision if he does an Erislandy Lara impression. I think in order for him to get a decision, he's going to have to engage in spots. I'm not saying he needs to go toe-to-toe with Canelo, but there will be moments in the fight. In order to win rounds, I think he's going to have to hold his feet for moments in rounds and really load up with some heavy punches that actually send spray flying off Canelo's head. And when you do that, Canelo's going to be able to land counters on you, either to head or to body. And Crawford has never felt power like that. So that is where the question mark is for me. If Crawford can take Canelo's power or neutralize it somehow by blocking it or whatever the case may be, then yes, Crawford should win. He is the more skilled fighter overall. He's the more athletic fighter overall. But I don't know where he can take Canelo's power, to head or body. He's never been hit like that. Kyle says, I have Crawford beating Canelo, but getting the Montreal screw job treatment. Shout out to all the old school WWF fans who recognize that reference there. The Montreal screw job. JM says Canelo gasses down the stretch too. He certainly does. But how's Crawford's stamina going to be with the extra weight on? That'll be interesting. And he hasn't fought for quite a while either, Crawford. Canelo's fought more recently. That's right, Choice. Heartbreak Kid versus Heart. All right, peeps. I'm going to draw the curtain on this live stream. As always, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining the conversation. It's been great, as usual. I want to give a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were Mr. Luca, big up, D, Matt, as in Matt Borgerson, Craig, Kieran Malcolm, Shush, Seamus McMichael, Cash, Wee Warrior, President Brush, Rich Piana, Lawrence King. Big shout out to Lawrence King. Was there anybody else? I'll make sure. James Clifford. Shout out to James Clifford. Let's double check all the super chats that I've read everybody out. I think I said President Brush, Wee Warrior, Cash, Matt Borgerson, Kieran Malcolm, D, Mr. Luke. Yeah, I got everybody. All right. So, big up, everyone for joining the conversation. Until next time, take care, be good. We'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.